Tenshinhan breaking Yamcha's leg wasn't just violent, but it was downright dirty. The Crane School's best versus the Turtle School's second best, third best? Well, that doesn't matter. This fight was heated from the jump. All the trash talking those two were doing, but only one man was walking from this fight. Literally. Because Tenshinhan, who had already had this fight won, decides, I'm gonna give this sumbitch something to remember me by. And that's when he snaps Yamcha's leg. Took him out like a little pussy. And he did it right in front of Yamcha's girlfriend. What a cold-blooded bastard. Killing someone in front of their child is really messed up, if you couldn't tell already. Well, that's exactly what Tao Pai Pai did to Bora in front of Appa. And Tao's nonchalant demeanor sells just how accustomed to murder he really is. After engaging Bora in a fight, Tao quickly overpowers Bora and launched a spear through his heart. And Appa's watching this while it happens, by the way. He also watches as his dad's body banged into the ground. Tao would go on to kill more people and eventually attempt to murder Appa, but Goku saved Appa and killed Tao. The end. All the non-Gokus versus Nappa was like the last fight taken up a notch. It was like watching a horror movie. Imagine you're a child and you see a bunch of your uncles and grown men just around you all die in explosions right in front of you. That's what little Gohan had to witness, not once, not even twice, but 3 freaking times. Within a span of a few hours, no less. With 4 of the 6 characters dying, this fight is structured almost like a slasher movie. Movies like Halloween, Friday the 13th, A Nightmare on Elm Street, The Terminator, Scream, Psycho, what am I missing? Alien. Movies like that. Think of movies like that when you see all these characters getting killed one after another. One of the most eye-popping moments for me as a kid, when I first watched this, wasn't even a kill. It was this scene right here. Nappa breaking Tenshinhan's arm was always disgusting, and I love it. Goku vs. Piccolo was one of the last fights in the series where humans could relate to the pain being inflicted by the attacks. It may be difficult for people to imagine just how painful a ki blast would feel in real life, but it's real easy to grasp that a hole in your freaking chest would hurt like hell. It hurts even more when you see Piccolo attacking the hole in Goku's chest with elbows, with kicks, all that other crap, and you see Goku screaming in pain. It's funny because I saw this scene in both Japanese and English, and the screaming in the Japanese and even the English dub do a great job of selling just how much pain Goku's being put through. It's nasty. There's also that scene where Goku nearly choked Piccolo after he entered his throat. I'm gonna pause on that one. And there's also the scene where Piccolo ripped off his own arm. And it was done with red blood, because up to that point they were still using red for Namekian blood, but by this point they still didn't know he was a Namekian. Piccolo and Goku versus Raditz. Now this fight was nuts. You got disembowelment, child abuse, brother abuse. Raditz was willing to off his own nephew, and some people still wonder why they don't want to wish him back. Like, how stupid could you be? Piccolo had his arm seared right off in this fight too. Like, that was nasty. And he bled red blood. Again with red blood, because they still hadn't used purple for Namekians. That's coming up a bit later. But the cherry on top of this bloody cake is Piccolo drilling giant holes through Raditz and through Goku. Again. Oh yeah, the main character died? That's pretty shocking. Shocking enough to earn a spot in my last video, the 10 most shocking Dragon Ball moments. Demon King Piccolo impales a man. Now, contrary to popular belief, a lot of people really think Dragon Ball's childish or not even violent. There's a lot of freaking violence in Dragon Ball, and this scene is just one of those many scenes. Another scene is when Goku had kicked Drum's eyeball off. Just knocked it right out of the socket. That's really freaking violent, and Dragon Ball doesn't really get the credit for how violent it really was. Piccolo impaling a guy at King's Castle is pretty nauseating, but arguably the most nauseating one of them all was Krillin and Frieza. And if you watch this scene uncut in the English dub, you got to hear Frieza going, "Right, I'm cowboy," and "Yeehaw, buckaroo," like as he was bouncing Krillin up and down. It's weird. One of the things about Dragon Ball Z's English dub is that it's really funny, like just these unnecessary lines. Android 20 impaling Yamcha was also pretty nauseating as well. I liked how it was just really slow and you could really feel the violence, just the nasty goriness of it all. The androids, as well as King Piccolo to be honest with you, are probably the most underrated villains in terms of violence in all of Dragon Ball. These two lifted a guy's head straight through out of his car and squeezed it off like a grape. Then when they found Yamcha, Android 20 buried his hand through Yamcha's chest. Frieza quickly put a hole through Krillin, like it was fast and swift, but this one with Yamcha was just so slow to the point where you could feel Yamcha's pain. And the blood splatter when he pulled out was also pretty nasty, but awesome, you know? You know what I'm saying? Like, it's like gross, but it's cool looking, you know? I remember thinking when I watched this that Yamcha was dead the first time I saw it. And of course, this one was also censored in the English dub. But the Dragon Thunder attack that ripped a hole through Vegeta's shoulder from the one-star dragon, I actually don't remember that being censored on Nicktoons, but maybe it was. I just don't remember it that way. Regardless though, this scene was also pretty freaking awesome. It's really violent and it catches you off guard too. The one with like, it's almost like the one with Frieza with Krillin, except this one's really painful because he electrocutes Vegeta while he's in it. Alright, now I want to focus on some fights. The first one I want to focus on is the fight with the Ginyu. I could have put any fight from Namek on this list, but just the scenes of Gohan after Recoome had snapped his neck are more violent than the actual neck snap itself. Like Gohan was over there twitching and shit, you know? But there was also the scene where Vegeta snapped Guldo's neck, which was toned down in the anime. Recoome blasting his own teeth out of his mouth thanks to Krillin kicking him in the head was also pretty freaking nasty too. Could you imagine that happening to you? And then there was the kick that damn near killed Krillin. Captain Ginyu punching a hole through himself before switching bodies is violent, but it's more ballsy than anything if you ask me. Like, you gotta have balls to do something like that to yourself, you know? Dodoria slaughtering Namekians, hands down, has got to be the most violent piece of anything to come out of Dragon Ball. This was disgusting. If Piccolo and Raditz was the cherry on top, then this fight, if you could even call it that, takes the whole cake. Zarbon's kills are pretty brutal himself, but even those pale in comparison to the body horror put on display by the deadly durian, Dodoria. He rips a hole through this guy's chest, blood splattering everywhere, and then he turns and opens his mouth and sets this guy on fire like a dragon. But when I first came across this scene uncut, the headbutt to this guy was always the most painful looking of these three kills. Goodness gracious, look at the blood pouring down the mountain. And he's so vicious. Look at how sadistic Dodoria is. And then after seeing three guys die in front of him, Mori just hands over the Dragon Ball, and it's almost like he said, fuck that, just take the ball and leave. But after he hands Frieza his ball, he's still uncooperative. So if you know these characters and you know Frieza, you know he's gonna wanna have the last laugh. So Frieza stirs the pot some more, and as Dende and his brother Cargo are fleeing the scene, Dodoria murders Cargo with no remorse whatsoever. In fact, he's even laughing about it. I want you guys to understand, in real life, that's no different to gunning down a small child. In the manga, it was Frieza who killed Cargo, while in the anime, Dodoria claimed this kill, which I personally like better because it shows the audience that if Frieza's left and right-hand men are capable of evil to this degree, you can only imagine just how fucked up Frieza really is. And as the horror just continues to ramp up, arguably the most brutal of Dodoria's kills is his very last. Dodoria screws around with Mori for a bit, but once he gets his hands on him, he viciously, and I mean viciously, snaps Mori's neck. And he did this in front of Dende. And if I haven't mentioned it before, while he's killing all these Namekians, Frieza and the rest of these sadistic pricks are enjoying every last second of it. Videl and Spopovich. I didn't mention this one in my first video on purpose because it's really obvious, but even when you remove the idea that this depicts domestic violence, you know, or just it's an actual fight, this fight on its own was still brutal. Dude, Videl caught a mouthful of his knee and lost a few teeth. Actually think about that. Spopovich kneed Videl so hard in the face, it knocked her teeth out of her mouth. That's painful to anybody. But it's not like Videl just took a beat in the whole fight. A little bit before the tables had turned, she was beating on him, you know? She kicked Spopovich in the face and turned his neck into a corkscrew. If this didn't happen in Dragon Ball, that would be a death sentence, and she was almost disqualified for it too, until he just popped his neck back into place. Vegeta slaughtered a whole Namekian village by himself, and that's also very underrated. It's amazing that Vegeta was ever redeemed in the series when he was doing crap like that. Like, he's an evil bastard, you know? For this section, I want to focus on some moments that aren't really some fights, but they're just really violent also. Like when those two guys sniped that old couple in the Majin Buu arc. So if you don't remember this, back when Majin Buu began tearing through Earth, the dark side of humanity really showed itself, specifically with these two guys. The leaner man convinced his friend to kill because it would just be blamed on Majin Buu anyway, right? So when an old couple comes walking down with food, out of nowhere, the woman is shot in the head and the old man frantically checks on her, only to be shot himself. So here's a question I got for you. If you were in this situation, would you have killed somebody if you knew you'd get away with it too? When the Cell Juniors broke Yamcha's arms in the Cell games, it kind of reminded me of the moment when Tenshinhan snapped his leg. Check out my previous video, part 1, for more on that. But in the anime though, Yamcha looks kind of pathetic because he's holding his arm and it doesn't even look that bad. However, in the manga, you really see how gory it gets. Yamcha's arm is all mangled from the attack and you can really feel how painful it is. You know, Yamcha's been on this list 3 times if you count my previous video. Not a good track record for this guy. Future number 17 shooting an old man with his own gun is another hyper-realistic violent moment. And here's a fun fact. Number 17 didn't even shoot him in the anime because Trunks got involved to save the day, which I actually like better. Not because it's not violent, but it's because Trunks was able to continuously keep his future saved, you know? But that's a side note, you know, Dragon Ball Super has something to say about that. But regardless, in the Viz manga, he isn't even holding a gun. It looks like he's trying to give him a fist bump or something, you know? It's really stupid. One of the most violent but also nasty looking moments in Dragon Ball was when first form Cell absorbed that fat old man. This was the introduction to Cell. Remember how everyone could sense Goku, Vegeta, and everyone else's power in him, and the creepy shell he left behind for Gohan, Trunks, and Bulma to see? Then once you actually see the guy in the flesh, well, no pun intended, he does that? Dude, that's pretty freaking brutal. That is one of the best villain introductions in all of Dragon Ball. Speaking of which, I might make a video on that. So I'll see you on the next one.